Welcome everybody back to the show. Today we have someone on the show who I don't know real well, but she's comes highly recommended from my youngest daughter. And that may seem like a strange thing to say, but my youngest daughter is one of the less motivated people in my family, physically speaking. She's a tremendous athlete, a strong person. She's a wonderful girl, but she's not someone that just loves to work out. And we searched around for someone to get her motivated in that department. And through some trial and error, through some friends, I was recommended this individual. And it's been an incredibly good experience for her. She's motivated to go. She seems to have a good time when she's there. And she's seen some results already, which is really great. So, this podcast, if you've been watching it, it's about movement. It's about going forward, being positive and growing. And identifying what's holding you back, because I feel things are held back emotionally, physically, or chemically. The simplest way is to look at each of those three categories and get after what's not working for you. Get after one of those departments or all three of those in whatever area you're struggling in. And all of our guests have had something to do with that realm. They're either understanding you chemically, like nutritional stuff. They're understanding you emotionally. So we've had a bunch of different people that have worked in the mental health department and mental health field. And we also have had a couple of coaches and personal trainer on before. So today we have an individual, Emily Wyse. She's going to talk about some of her credentials and how she got started, and then give us some pointers. And, because like anything, when you're being coached, it's a personal relationship. You want to be able to, or with your doctor, for that example, the better the communication is, the better you understand this individual, the better your results are going to be. I love to try and, get inside my patients' heads and make them get comfortable with me so they can just tell me anything. And, 99% of the time, I'm happy to hear all that information. So welcome to the show, Emily. How are you?
I'm good. I am so thankful that you had me on the show today. I know I was putting it off a few weeks, and I was like, okay, I just got to do it. I'm going to dive in and just chat with you.
Yeah. Have you done many podcasts in the past?
I've done none.
Okay. It's always amazing to me because, being my age, this podcast thing's relatively new. And I feel like everyone younger than me has got one, has one, does them, and so it's actually refreshing for me that someone at your stage of the game isn't experienced in something high tech like this, or whatever you call this entity at this point. So I'm glad to be your first one. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I gotta go prepare. I gotta know what to say. It was funny. So
yeah, I was told by Mitch, who puts these together for me, that a podcast is a conversation that you're just kind of listening in on by two people that you think are interesting to listen to. I got started watching Joe Rogan's podcasts, and I thought, what a fun time he's having. And what great guests, and nobody owns him. He can say what he wants. At least it appears that way, because he says things all over the board. He's gone back and forth politically. He's gone back and forth on viral issues because he's searching for truth. Right. And the only way to search for truth is to not have your wallet involved, and my job is to get people healthy. And that is an interesting search for truth. And so today, first thing I want to understand and know about you is, what got you, sort of your credentials and what got you started in this field. What made you want to do this for a living?
So I got started, I always kind of knew I wanted to be in the field of like athletics or training. So I started off my journey in college being an athletic training student. And then I kind of developed wanting to be a physical therapist. And then it then changed to being chiropractic. So I ended up going and graduating from upstate and then going to Duville for the chiropractic program. But I got my 6th concussion while in school. So then I just was like, I couldn't do a lot of things because of it. So then I found a lot of like therapies and a lot of different help for concussions. So then I rerouted my life and I went to massage school, and then I went to muscle activation school up in Toronto. And then I also went to school and got my master's in strength and conditioning at Canisius. So I have a little bit of like an array of a background through like injuries, like personal stuff, even emotional things, and then as well as education. So it's easy to understand people to a degree. I'm working on my behavior change specialist now, so hopefully doing like stress management stuff with companies and or individuals.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, there's nothing like personal experience. You know, no one wants to suffer really, but when you have something that throws you off, like concussions, for me, it was migraines that got me started in chiropractic.
Yeah.
You can feel people's pain when you've had their shoes on. And I like the path that you took, to be honest with you, because an indirect path like that, you're kind of bouncing off a lot of different disciplines, finding what's best for you. And you can be able to think of the different types of people you can relate to because of that, not just in the field, but also people that you're actually working with and working on. And I love you have such a respect for the emotional thing. Tell me more about that. You mentioned something about fixing your own emotional stuff and wanting to explore more into that.
Yeah, so when I first became a trainer almost like 10 years ago now, I would always go to my clients and I would confide in them on things. I'd be like,
Mhm.
oh, I'd get their advice because I was young. I didn't know like the communication skills that you need to develop to be a successful personal trainer. So then
Mhm.
as time started going on, I actually just started going back to training an old client, and it's like night and day difference. She's like, you're on like the other side of the spectrum now where you're listening and taking what I'm saying and implementing it into training or into life skills or giving advice on like what maybe they should be doing like with a certain situation. So it's more like that. So I used to confide and now I'm the opposite. Now I'm the one that they're coming to, and it's like a safe place in the gym. And sometimes people come in super stressed out and they don't have like a outlet for that, and they come in there and maybe we start with a breathing meditation, or maybe we start with some like goal sheets, or we write down everything that's on their mind to just clear their mind to start getting into movement. And then we move through a bunch of different ranges or different motions to get someone to move better and to kind of figure out how their body's moving in space and like how it comes up emotionally in their body as well. Like their emotions come up into their body. So.
Right. One of the things I look at is okay, you think about how long we've been on this planet in this form. There's a bunch of different numbers. I read a lot of Mark Sesson's work. He said 165,000 years we've been in this kind of form, this body, and we survived in pretty dire circumstances: famine, war, tribal conflicts. And for me, I think, okay, the first thing that happens is we sense the environment. Then if we have a good genome and a good series of experiences, we build a physical change, whether it be adrenaline, cortisol, blood vessel diameter changes, blood moving to different parts of our body to best deal with the situation we see. And I'm not just talking fight flight, I'm talking about every imaginable thing, from deep relationships to saber-toothed tigers. Right. So we then have this physical response, and you can tell the primal being in us then has that physical memory. It wants to express it through motion, or maybe verbally, right? Whether it be yelling to intimidate an animal, or just plain running towards it or running away from it. So we build up all this chemistry when we sense the environment, but in the modern world, we don't have that physical expression as easily. Because if you're someone, a keyboard warrior there, and you're typing your angry statements on Twitter, and having a little bit of a Twitter battle, whatever they call that, you're going to end up with all these chemical shifts in your body and this frustration and blood changes. And where you're going with it, it buries itself inside you. And in my opinion, that energy then becomes destructive. So to have a physical outlet for that is such an amazing thing. The first time I saw that, it was I'm not a big hockey fan actually, but I was watching a hockey game and this guy was really ferocious. And then they did an interview with him after, and he was so calm. I thought, and so intelligent, he was so well spoken. I thought it's interesting that he has these two sides to him. But doesn't it make sense that he got that out on the ice and then could return back because he flushed the chemistry that was created by the game? Right?
Yeah. And just an example too of that is that your daughter had come into the gym like a previous Saturday, and her shoulder was really, really sore. And like her skin was flared up, like, she had a little bit of like that cystic acne or that acne. And she was just really inflamed. And she came in, we did breathing, we did like progressive muscle relaxation, and then we wrote out stuff and we did visualization. And then I just gave her a protocol to take home for like breathing and like the sauna and a walking meditation. And the next day she was like, my skin is like clear, my shoulder doesn't hurt. And we didn't do a ton of like, we did movement, but we didn't do a ton that was specific even to the shoulder. We worked a lot through her foot and like her lower body motion that just carried up the chain to like kind of solve or start fixing that shoulder issue. So it's really interesting. But
one of the things that I love and I see more and more is how much the field of chiropractic has been incorporated into other disciplines. A personal trainer, 20 years ago would never speak like you're speaking. You had that respect for kinetic chain dynamics. That's always been part of chiropractic. It had different names, but you're understanding the emotional significance. To have the idea of a sports psychologist, fascinating to me as well. To see this stuff happen in the 28 years that I've been in practice is amazing, because we can all get to that higher truth that the emotions are a big part of this game. And that if we're not physical beings, we're going to be bottling up the chemistry of emotion. And that to me is a serious problem. I mean, everyone knows, a lot of people know about cortisol. But who knows what's still inside the body when we have these emotional changes. One of the things example I use is I tell people, okay, when a person's embarrassed, you can see the change in their color of their cheeks. They get red, their face might get red, and they start twitching around or whatever. So you had a thought, embarrassment, an emotion, and you change the blood vessel diameter in your cheeks. You think that emotions aren't going to affect your body? I mean, that's an outward obvious one. Imagine the 10,000 ones that are going on just in your liver, in your gallbladder, in your kidneys, and then what part of your brain you turn on or turn off to then try to, historically, solve a stressful issue. So I just love that you're on board with that. I think your respect and understanding of chiropractic in there is showing, to me at least, and those experiences you've been through personally and bouncing around with different interests, fantastic. It's showing, and it's obviously, like I say, the results you've had with my daughter have been really great. You're like the person that got through to her, so often the media is the message.
It goes both ways too, because now I'm a patient at your place with Nick as well, Dr. Nick. So, because I don't know if you've ever read the book or listened to the book, The Body Keeps Score.
I have not.
So it talks about how emotions come up in the body. So like for one example, it was like, I don't know if I remember off the top of my head, but it was like about incest and like how that presented in the person's body, and then how they had to do therapy through that and how it kept coming up, and that they actually ended up doing like yoga and specific movements to open up that area, and the person like started to heal and they were able to move on with their life. So it's a very interesting book. Absolutely. I think you'd like it.
Yeah, I'll have to put that on the list. That sounds like a good one, because I've had a lot of patients where you can see the shame or the abuse, in the tone of their body. Because as you know, when you get to know your patients or your clients, they start opening up and telling you more things. Yeah. And, the stories I hear, I oftentimes realize that I have sometimes more in common with hairdressers and bartenders, in that I hear stories and life, horrifying things. And I love to be able to point people the right direction. I love when people share with me those kind of intimate things, and to not break too many professional barriers. Personally, I tend to share my stuff with my patients too. I get more personal than what's been advised with my patients, because I just think that's just a human thing to do, to show them my vulnerabilities, because I'm not perfect and I'm not complete all the time. As long as I can guide them and I'm sane and healthy enough to guide them, then everybody wins. So one of the questions I had for you though is, who's the perfect client for you? Like, who do you think you excel with? What do you want to attract in your practice? So for anybody listening that thinks, hey, she seems pretty cool, what would be like somebody that you just focus in on and make the biggest changes with? Is there an age or a type or a sport or anything like that?
There's not a specific age or type. It's just the person that wants to be there and get better. Because I've had, younger athletes that come in and it's fun. Like you get to move around a lot with them. You play a lot of games and you work on like a ton of different things with them. And then I have a lot of like triathletes or older women. So I have both ends of the spectrum. So I like everyone, but it's the people that want to be there and that are open to learning and just expanding and growing. That's like the people I want. So
Yeah. I put something on Facebook the other day that if you didn't have sort of a vision for the future, you'll end up spending your time in the past.
Yep.
And I think there's a powerful thing because I have people around me sometimes that their favorite thing is to dwell on sort of the nostalgia of their lives in the past. And, there's time for that. Obviously, there's things to enjoy about our history, but I'm more future bound more than that. I've always been like, kind of attracted to science fiction because I like what's happening next. That's more exciting than me reanalyzing the past, even if it's a good past. I'm not saying good or bad. So I think, like you're saying, people that want to change and grow.
Yeah.
I've had a patient of mine's a psychologist, and she said she spends 10 minutes talking about the past and then 50 minutes talking about where she's going with, or where the client's going to go.
Yeah,
right.
It's very true.
I think it's true in your field, right? You can say, okay, I've had this injury, I've had these problems, this is where I'm not good. Okay, great. Now here's what we're going to do about it. Here's where we're going.
Because it's kind of like when a client sometimes walks in the door, they're living into the past, like you're saying, in the sense of like, I have this, and this going on. I have a divorce going on and my daughter won't talk to me, anything like that. And it's like, first I just listen and then I'm like, okay, no problem. Like, let's get on the mat. Let's start addressing it. Like maybe do a specific breathing protocol based on like the emotions that have come up. Like maybe we have to shift them into parasympathetic, or maybe we have to shift them into sympathetic where we just start exciting them and get them moving. So it's just interesting based on like how, they present coming in the door. But a lot of people live in the past when they come in the door, complaining about something, complaining about work, complaining about something that's happened. And then by the time they're leaving, they're laughing and we're having fun and just joking around playing games.
Absolutely. That's my approach as well. I believe I try to get people to say, okay, that's your past. Let's talk about this. Let's go there. Because isn't that more interesting? Isn't that exciting? And people, you really can't be just your past, because if everything's changing every day, and I have some very negative people sometimes, and I'll say, well, you're getting older, and no one wants to hear that, right? But no, you can't be the same because you're aging. So technically you're not the same as yesterday, you're older. And they're like, wow, that doesn't sound positive. Well, just know that you might be wiser now, right? Because you're older. You've learned more, right? You're a different person. You're not the exact same person. You carry some of that. How much do you want to focus on it? Because what you focus on expands, right?
Yep.
So that's awesome. One of the things I want to get into is nutrition, because, obviously I always tell people, if you ever want to just find a topic that conflicts itself, daily, I think nutrition might be the best one to go with, because every so many years, and I've been following nutritional concepts and dietary things, forever. I come from pretty heavy people, so it takes some effort for me to stay thin. And to do so, I've never really gotten into crazy fad diets because they always seem wrong to me, but I definitely have played with different ones. How do you approach that with a client?
So I like to look at nutrition. Like, I have never sat there really and counted out calories or anything like that. And people are like, oh, you look so thin still. For myself personally, I'm like, but I'm very active. I'm on my feet a lot. I move a lot. I try to prioritize sleep and try to get stress down so that you don't have that low grade inflammation. So personally, I like to just follow a diet where I'm not eating out a lot. I'm not eating sugar of any sorts. I'm not eating soy, corn, gluten, dairy, because essentially it's not in any food that it gives you any nutritional value. Like, I don't look at the macronutrients in the sense of like, oh, I just worked out, I got to have 24 grams of this and 5 grams of this. I don't look at it like that. I look at like, what does my body kind of need right now and what's going to fuel me? So maybe I have like some avocado and I throw it in a bowl, and maybe I just have that just to fuel me a little bit longer. So it's more in the sense of, what does the food give back to me? Like, in the sense of like not having to count calories or be stressed out about that, because it creates more inflammation. It creates more upset in the body, rather than just being like, what, my meal is just like, I roasted up some potatoes. I use like a healthy oil so that the anti-inflammatories are higher. And then I cooked up maybe some eggs if I can digest that well, or I made a meat or something that I can digest well. Sometimes, it's nice to do plant-based at points in time as well, like lower density, higher density foods. So I actually work currently with a functional nutritionist. So anytime I do recommend food ideas or any concepts of eating to clients, I always just say like, hey, you stay away from these things. You eat and cook at home. You're going to be a lot safer and better off. Like, eat when you're hungry. Don't eat when you're not hungry. Try after you eat too. I really like the it's called Breathe, the book, and they talk about closing your mouth after you eat so that you only do nasal breathing only, which shifts you into parasympathetic response so that it's rest and digest. So it's really interesting. So like, I'm more into like no distractions when you eat, be comfortable, try not to eat over your desk when you're working, try to close the mouth and breathe in and out through the nose after. Don't think of food as good or bad because we don't want to associate emotion with the food, and just try to get healthy things in and cook. It means that you love something, you're enjoying something. You have to care and nurture food when you cook. So it's just a happy emotion that comes up. So that's more how I look at it. So
that's great. No, that's a great view of food. I mean, I think the idea of cooking your food, people think, well, it's time consuming, it's this, that. But one of the things I tell people is when you're cooking food, you're smelling it. And when you're smelling it, you're cueing enzymes to then break it down. Yeah. And who doesn't want to play with something they love, right? I mean, so you're playing with the food in a sense, you're preparing the food, and then you eat it. And the nasal breathing is fascinating because I became aware of that about a month ago, how much I knew that nitric oxide was produced when a person breathes through their nose. But I didn't realize someone recently read a study, there's something like 13 or 30 gases that are produced when you breathe through your nose. But the cueing of the parasympathetic, which for people who don't get that, what that means is basically it's the rest and digest, as you said. It's the opposite of that fight-flight response. And it's where digestion occurs, right? So when someone is eating in the parasympathetic state, meaning kind of relaxed and at peace, they're in a state where their digestive system is turned on to do its job. And if you don't think that's true, go into a restaurant. Why is the atmosphere nice? Why are the lights dim and there might be nice music? You're not going to eat food in a gun range, right? I mean, that doesn't sound like a good idea. You got sounds and maybe some anger in there, right? So you're not going to have the best place to eat. And it matches that 165,000 years, right? You spent the day struggling to gather or hunt or prepare food, and then you were exhausted and you ate. So the exhaustion and the peace and the job's over and the worries are done. We have food now to live and survive another day, was that parasympathetic state. So food's going to get broken down the best. We're going to rebuild our bodies. So yeah, my dietary recommendations and beliefs are very aligned with what you just said. It's great to hear that back from people, because, the higher truths of that, the more people that are looking at it and trying to find holes in it, the better. And that's definitely how I do things.
Yeah, because it's important too, like when you do anything with nutrition, to actually change behaviors, because that's the biggest thing with nutrition. It's you go to DoorDash 10 times a week, like, so then maybe we have to take those food choices that you keep getting and maybe we have to make them and implement them at home, change around our schedule, try to get more structure. So it's all about decreasing stress, having structure in the day, and trying to mimic things that you do like and cooking those things. So
yeah, fantastic. Well, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to see if you had something more to add or a concise thing. When you get someone that's not motivated very well, you kind of talked about making things playful a minute ago, and I like that idea. Expand a little bit on when someone comes in, they're exhausted, they may have like 3 excuses, like my ankle's swollen, this is bothering me, blah, blah, blah. So you go to more of a therapeutic / workout at that point?
So it kind of depends. So if someone's like more depressed, like if they come in, I mean, people have vocalized that before, I'm really depressed today, I'm so sad, whatever. So then what I do at that point in time, I want to shift them into something that's fun and playful. So like we might play a game, like in the sense of like, hey, we got to keep this ball off the ground. It doesn't matter their age. I do it with every age. And guess what? They start laughing. The endorphins start changing. They're getting competitive. They're like, haha, I can do it better than you. And I'm like, yeah, you got it. See? Exactly. And then that's when I start the workout after that. So I shift those endorphins to start being like oxytocin, that happy hormone, and then start working out and changing stuff then. And then guess what? 90% of the time they don't complain about the pain that they had, because it's just that mind shift. And then I'm like, hey, let's visualize this. Like even for your daughter, we were doing like thoracic rotation. I was like, she's like, I can't do this. I go, No. We're going to stop. Visualize yourself doing it and then say that you can do it and then let's do it. And then she was able to do it. So sometimes it's just locked up because of, like we said, the emotions and other things that go into it.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly, that's a nice expansion on that, because I think changing someone's state, that's what you're doing, right? They have a certain state they come in with, and then you're shifting it through something playful. And so often we get stuck in these deep, dark thoughts, and that isn't a playful place. And motion, it feels best when it's in a playful state. You know, I mean, my workouts, I like them to be fun.
Right.
You know, I've had people say stuff like, you know, what's the best workout? I'm like, the one you enjoy the most, right? Yep. I mean, there's so much equipment out there. There's so many styles and everything. It's like, what's the best? The one you're gonna do. We'll start with that.
Exactly.
Like one of the questions I had for you is about home exercise equipment, because a lot of people may not be able to get to or go to, or don't think they can afford a personal trainer, which I would argue anybody on that, as I know you would. But at home, what do you think is, for any viewers that are just going to do that, what's one piece of equipment you think is the most used and the most valuable for a home setting?
Well, first it would be their imagination, because you can do anything and everything you want with just your body or furniture. Like you could literally, like, you can't do a push-up on the ground, great, we can go to the wall, we can go to a couch, we can go to your bed, we can go to a chair. You want to do dips, we'll go to the chair. You want to do body weight squats, perfect. Okay, you have soup cans, let's do upper body stuff. You can implement so many things in, and then YouTube has a ton of stuff that's free where you can go on there and do body weight workouts. But if you were talking equipment wise, like if someone were to want to spend money, then I would just say, a few dumbbells, kettlebells, maybe some bands. It's the cheaper side of it. And then for us in Buffalo, since it's cold in the winter, if you want to add in some cardio stuff, then a piece of cardio equipment, or you can still keep it less expensive and do interval training, because you can always do interval training, and I could be like, hey, we're doing nasal breathing only, and you got a sprint right now, and you cannot recover through your mouth. Well, that's going to get their heart rate pumping just as fast as doing a sprint on the treadmill or doing something else that is eliciting more of that cardiorespiratory response.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. Like you say, imagination. I was flying out to see my in-laws one time, and I happened to grab a couple magazines out of my office that were interesting to me, Men's Health and Outside Magazine, or some great magazines. And in the one, they had this workout in the forest, and it was basically, okay, you're in the forest, you're on a hiking trail, whatever, and you want to add a workout to that. And it was all these, type of things like, thrusters and overhead work with grab a rock, carry the rock up, a half mile. And I thought, that's just so basic. I can't believe I never thought of like just picking up a rock and carrying it for a while. And, it was a couple of years ago. So since then, when I'm in the Rockies and hiking, believe me, you don't really want to add a lot of weight. But I always want to take a couple of rocks back home with me as souvenirs from the top of the mountain. And the last couple of times I'm like, all right, this one's kind of heavy. I think I can do it. I used to take the smallest one down. Now I'm like, I'm going to take one the size of a baseball. And it's much more fun to have a bigger rock than a smaller rock. Now I have a collection of different size rocks at home, and some of the big ones, I thought, I carried that all the way down, So, anyone that hikes in any significant manner knows how much the backpack weight means. It can annihilate you if you don't get that thing light.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think that's really good. If I was to pick one muscle that you think people need to make stronger, what would you say that is? What do you see the weakest, most detrimental muscle in your work?
Well, I would group it in the sense of saying that the foot, because the foot is so important because it's the base, right? So you could say, okay, maybe it's your tibialis anterior then, because it dorsiflexes a lot. And if you don't have that dorsiflexion, then what's going to happen up the chain is that your knees aren't going to be able to lock out. Your hips aren't going to be able to go forward. You're going to get more kyphotic through your thoracic spine, and the head's going to start to drift forward if we can't even get that dorsiflexion. So that's what, I really like working with the foot a lot. It's complicated, but that would be the muscle I'd pick. But I would say the foot overall, because if that foot is not moving and it's not malleable, then you're going to have a lot of trouble changing direction. You're going to have trouble walking through your gait. You're going to have a ton of issues, even health issues, because tons of sensory input goes through our feet and our hands. So it's an important thing I think is the foot, but the tibialis anterior would probably be my answer, just in the sense that it does help with that dorsiflexion, which we lose so much of. If you see people and they can't sit in the bottom of the squat and just sit there comfortably, I mean, it's stemming from ankle range and not being able to get into that dorsiflexion, and of course other things as well. But
yeah, for anybody who doesn't know dorsiflexion, it's the ability to stretch your calf muscle. So it's bringing your toes towards your shin. And the tibialis anterior you mentioned is the muscle next to the shin bone. If you ever get kicked in the shin or you get shin splints, that's the area that Emily's referring to. And I agree with you, the foot's crucial. Are you someone that's into orthotics? Do you recommend them?
I personally don't like orthotics. And it's because, like, I actually had a foot injury. I tried to wear them and it made I'd get a burning sensation in the bottom of my foot. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get rid of these. And I just went to barefoot mostly all the time. So I go barefoot, and I even just got those Vivo hiking shoes. Hence why I brought that up earlier. But the reason I don't like orthotics is because it kind of, if you think of like a cast, you put a cast on someone's arm, right? You're trying to make it not move, right? So that it can heal. However, with the foot, it has to move so much and go from supination to pronation, midfoot, rear foot, forefoot. They all have to move to allow us to function through our day-to-day life. So when you have an orthotic on, it kind of pushes up, maybe it pushes us up into supination. Well, now if I want to change direction laterally, or if I want to come down on that foot, I can't go into pronation at all. So the risk to me, the risk to reward for it isn't as beneficial. In the sense of wearing them. And it doesn't teach your foot how to actually go through the ranges that it lost. So of course people are born with different, abnormalities or anything that's going on in the foot. But like I do have a flatter foot, and I do have somewhat of a callus through like my big toe, because I don't have enough of that extension through that big toe due to a surgery. But however, I have no pain when I go barefoot, and I have pain when I wear orthotics now. So it's so used to going through different ranges.
Were those custom made orthotics or just a standard?
I've had both. I've had custom made ones, and then I've had like just super feet ones, and then I've had like ones from a doctor and stuff. My physical therapist, he recommends, I'd have to get the name, but it's like, it's almost, and it helps with concussion stuff as well, but it's like a rubber that lays in your insole of your shoe, but it has like little bumps on it. So it gives you neuro input to your feet to give you back up to your brain. So that's more of like what I would recommend. But I don't necessarily say like if someone is wearing an orthotic, they should take it out. They should work on things and work on becoming barefoot. But I'm not sure if you've ever heard this, but I have heard people be like, yeah, every time I wear my sneakers or my shoes with orthotics in, I have no back pain. And then when I take my orthotics out, I have back pain. And I go, oh, so you have foot problems. So,
right.
I take that stimulus away.
I agree with that. I think the thing that's different between our beliefs is I like orthotics, but I wear a pair, but I'm very aware of what you're saying about casting and not allowing the foot to have enough movement. The two ways I solve that, because I have patients that if they don't put their orthotics in, they get either knee pain because their arch has fallen so much, or they get strained calluses, and maybe they're in their 50s and 60s, and now with the mild arthritic changes in their ankle and their forefoot, if I don't do something, they're just in pain all the time. But I agree with you, I guess, as well, because I love the idea of having a barefoot stimulus to the body. I don't know if I made a video on this or talked too much about it, but it's in an upcoming lecture series I'm putting together about grounding, right? Getting the electrical the static electricity out of your body by putting your feet on real ground.
Yes, correct.
And, right. So I believe that being barefoot is important, but it depends on what are you walking on, right? Because we've made artificial ground. So if you're barefoot on artificial ground, are you really barefoot, or are you in some kind of strange scenario? But if you're barefoot in the grass or on gravel or sand, then in my opinion, you're truly barefoot. And that can create a stimulus and a strength to the foot. So when I'm at my office, I have orthotics in my shoes. When I go running in the park on the soccer field, I wear barefoot shoes with no orthotics in them. And I think the idea of mixing it up, because I have thank God, really great arches and pretty solid feet, but I did deal with a plantar fascial pain one time that I just couldn't get rid of. Some of it was from chronic inflammation, because back then I was eating dairy products. It was 10, 15 years ago. I've been off those for a long time now. But I had it, and the way I managed it was to put an orthotic in. I was going to do it temporarily. And I liked them enough because I wasn't, like you're saying, dependent on them. I wear them in my office because I have a cement floor with a little tiny bit of commercial carpeting. So my floor is really hard in there. And I feel like if I'm pounding around for 12 hours, jumping up and down on people, that maybe that's detrimental to the arch and to the foot dynamics. But when I'm on vacations, I've never done full on hiking barefoot, but I have used barefoot shoes in hiking scenarios. And I love the feeling of running on grass in barefoot shoes. I just have a pair of, I think they're Merrells. I don't like the toes separated because my toes are so ticklish and weird. I don't like any people touch them and I jump through the roof. So separating my toes, even with those, old flip-flop things, drives me nuts. So my shoe is completely, encases my entire foot, but all that's on the bottom is, little tiny piece of rubber. So it's truly, in a sense, that barefoot dynamic. I'm a big fan of reflexology and at least the stimulus to the base of the foot. And I formed a company years ago with a friend of mine, and we was just creating new ideas. We thought, can we come up with new ideas? It was just a way of having lunch, to be honest with you. And he's a real good friend, so we had a good time. So we would bring ideas, and we tried to shoot each other's ideas down or criticize them or build them up. It wasn't about being negative, but it was about being realistic. And one of my ideas was this mat that you rolled out, like a yoga mat, but twice as long, and had little rubberized little bumps in it. And I thought, what a great idea this is. Well, I had reinvented a wheel. It's already out there, so it wasn't anything original. But I thought, what a cool idea that someone else had that I sort of rethought about, to be able to walk on these bumpy mats, because you're going to get that stimulus from all different angles. A foot is, like you're saying, I forget how many bones in the foot, but it's probably like 200 or something. And to get all those joints to be shifted and pressured and to use muscles at different origin and insertions based on what you're stepping on, how could that not be good, right? It's just a way of creating strength. But to me, I mix orthotics with situations, right? With the patient's actual problem. You definitely gave orthotics a fair shot, right? You had a couple different pairs, you put them in and out, and they didn't work for you. And I think that's fair. And I've done that with patients as well. But I like a custom orthotic more than a store-bought one because they're custom. I also believe that people are wearing their shoes too tight. I usually tell people, if you think you're a size 10, you're probably a size 10 and a half. So I'll put an orthotic in and tell them to go to a 10 and a half. And sometimes that's the right thing. And I also recommend, don't get dependent on these. Try to be in natural settings, getting that foot stimulated, and roll your foot over a tennis ball, roll your foot over some kind of like rolling pin, get that arc. You want your foot to do what it naturally would do. I don't think anybody should forget that tread on a shoe is making up for the fact that we're not using our toes. So then our toes and the metatarsal arch there, right behind the toes, is a gripping type of thing. And when we don't use it anymore, it sits dormant with an orthotic in or without, and you're using the tread to grab the ground. You're creating an atrophied foot. And how could that support an arch? How could that be healthy, right? So I agree. I think what you're saying is valid.
And I think the other, just to add on to what you said about how you work with the orthotics on as well too. And then like, even in the sense of like when I was in school for muscle activation technique, like, you'd go in, treat a muscle, and you would go have them do that particular thing that was maybe painful, and you would do it. And then could they replicate 10 reps pain-free? They couldn't. Okay, so the stimulus was too high. So then you had to go back and you had to go change muscles again and readdress it, and then you go back again. But that's kind of going along with what you're saying, is that you definitely couldn't go from wearing orthotics to not wearing them, because you have to make sure that you're working up to a stimulus in a time frame that you could actually maintain a good position. So like for you, for instance, when you're adjusting people, you're constantly moving through different ranges through that foot, and you probably wouldn't be able to hold that good position for your foot for that long of a period of time on that surface if you were barefoot. So it makes sense that it would complement to what you're doing. And then when you go off and you run and do different things like that, that your foot gets to move freely because it's a lot less load. We have less stress at that time, and we're able to move through a lot of ranges.
Right, right. I like to pay respect to the idea that at a certain point, a little support's a good idea because we're fatiguing out. And I know a lot of patients have actually injured their backs because of fatigue. It isn't that they're that weak. They're not endurant, obviously, but to what degree, like I'm a skier and I've been skiing my whole life. And, they've always said that the last run you take is the one you get injured on. And it's true. And you wonder why. And I thought, well, sometimes the last run, I think, okay, I'm going to burn this one. I'm going to fly, and you think last run of the day, I'm just going to, knock it out. And that's some of the reason you're skiing reckless. But the other reason is, you're fatigued. It's the last run, and there's a lot of times there's a reason it's the last run. It might be because everyone's tired,
right.
And maybe you're the most tired one. And so then you lose control and you're injured. So I try to pay respect to that in my practice. Some of my days are, 12, 13 hours long. And that's a lot of pounding and yanking and cranking on people. So there's going to be, some fatigue in any part of my body. And the last thing is I want is, the base of my body, that foot, to be a problem. And I like what you said earlier, when someone's back hurts with their orthotics out and then it doesn't hurt with them in, do they have a back problem? No, they have a foot problem, right? Getting to the cause of stuff so important. We learned in chiropractic college that wherever the person hurts, the problem is oftentimes 3 places away, 3 joints away, or 3 kinetic chain alterations away. And when I'm working on someone's neck and they're kind of wondering why, because they have lower back pain, I'm like, well, your head is 4 inches forward. Take this weight, and I'll hand them a 5-pound dumbbell or something and say, hold it close to your body. Now hold it out 4 inches. Now hold it out 8 inches. But it gets heavier, it gets harder because of leverage. I said, and you're hanging by ligaments. Your head's hanging out in front of you by ligaments. Ligaments are non-contractile. And what you're doing, you're stretching them. And then your head's going forward. Now it's going to start to come down. You get a little bump on your back, and you're not going to like it. So let's get that taken care of. So we're adjusting them in multiple planes.
Right.
One of the questions I put together ahead of time, because I sometimes forget to ask this kind of question because it's a little corny, but I like it. It's what about personal training makes you smile? Like, what is it about when you're doing it, you think, God, that's just fun, because there's things in practice that hit me and I think that is just plain, I'm just getting a kick out of that. Like, what's your favorite thing about it with a client?
My favorite thing would probably be that like they're progressing and I'll get text messages back of like, I can't believe how far I've come. Like I'm like lifting 3 times the amount I used to. I have no back pain. So that's like when I smile and I always like take the message and I'm like a little kid. I'm like, Mom, look at like this person did blah, blah, blah. And she gets excited. I get excited. So it's more seeing other people's successes and like them progressing. And learning and changing. It's so awesome to see it because you see it from the beginning to the like wherever they're at, and it's so cool, like emotionally, physically, everything. It's so awesome to just watch people change.
Yeah, to make a difference in someone's life that they'll say when the student's ready, the teacher appears, and when the student's ready and they come into my office and I'm the teacher and I appear and I say the right stuff and you get a change and you shift their life. And you feel like maybe a lot of people couldn't have done that. Maybe then it makes you feel proud. It makes you happy because you've moved someone in a positive direction. And I think that's just deep inside that feels so cool, right? It's such an awesome thing to get into. Speaking of that kind of thing, who do you look up to? Give us some people that whether you mentioned a couple books earlier. Is there an author or an expert that people can maybe get their hands on that has guided you to become who you are?
Well, there's 2 people that own companies. One's up in Toronto. He actually worked with the Buffalo Bills. He doesn't have any books or anything, but he's an instructor for muscle activation technique. His name is Eric Seifert. So he's a very, very smart person. He does muscle activation technique, which is basically similar to applied kinesiology, but it's just finding, neurologically, like what muscles are weak, how to palpate them to get them to turn on, do testing, stuff like that. And then the other person is Harvey Martin. He owns MindStrong. So he works with athletes, and I worked with him for just over a year personally, and he works with athletes in breathing and mindset shifting. So he works with a ton of MLB, NHL, and football players. So he works with a ton of them. But now, based on that information, they have recommended books and stuff. So I like the one book, the Breathe book. That one was really good. And Jaws, those two go hand in hand. It talks about positional stuff for your jaw, and why we have so many issues with, you know, how our teeth have formed, how our sinus cavity has formed, and what we can do to kind of start changing that. So those books are really, really interesting because it goes hand in hand with performance, in the sense of like, if I can breathe better, one, I'm gonna be less stressed, cortisol will go down, I'm going to have better formation through my mouth. And like, the more nasal breathing you do, the more your saliva kind of swishes around in your mouth and cleans your teeth, so you're not going to get as much decay, you're not going to get sinus infections as much, like you're going to be overall more healthy, your immunity is going to be up, and it, at least your nose filters things out where mouth breathing does not. So, and it goes hand in hand with neck position and like spinal position a lot, because your mouth breather, 95% of the time, they're going to have a forward head, and they're probably going to grind their teeth. They're probably going to have bad breath or teeth decay. So it's very interesting that the breathing kind of goes into that. And then they talk about how you can lose weight actually through breathing. And it's very true. Like, I've even done breathing exercises. My stomach's bloated. It's like, you don't see any definition through it. I did 20 minutes, 30 minutes of breathing. I get up, I like have a six pack. I'm like, what the heck? I didn't even do anything. I just breathe. So
no, yeah. I've read a couple of studies about weight loss and breath, and what one of the correlations they made is that you can't create a fire without oxygen, and that to burn calories, you know, because most people realize, I hope, that a calorie is a unit of heat. It's not an amount of fat. And that to get that oxygen in your body, you better breathe deeply. And I saw a study where they correlated breath with activity and the amount of calories burned. And it wasn't that different, that a person was breathing, not even moving, and they were burning a lot of calories. And then the person doing the same amount of breathing while exercising only burned a little bit more. And I thought, that is astronomically odd that our body would be so efficient that the breath had more to do with the calorie burn than the actual muscle contraction. I still find that I want to hear more, because I partially don't believe that, to be honest with you, but it's good food for thought, right?
Yeah, you expel, like, if you get efficient at breathing, you can expel up to 8 pounds through your lungs. So nice. It's a little crazy, but yeah,
it is that's when you do the science.
The other thing too that's very interesting is, like, say you were to do like mind games and like a lot of thinking, that also burns a ton of calories. So like sometimes, like, if someone comes in and we're doing like mind games, like, hey, you got to read this chart, do a task associated with this color or this number, and they have to think, they're going to just burn that many more calories because they're now thinking. Your brain's a muscle, you got to think. So doing that and being able to breathe right. Okay, why are you sticking your tongue out now? What are you doing? Why are you changing this mouth position? You ever look at Michael Jordan? I think when he won, like, I think it's Michael Jordan that did like the game-winning shot, is like his tongue was like out, and he's biting it because concentration went so high that, you know, you do funny things with your face and like your body, you know. So
I've been known to do that same thing, and ever since I was a child, I'd stick my tongue out when I was concentrating, and my father used to, afraid I was going to bite it, so he would tap the bottom of my jaw. Just in other words, can you feel your tongue in there? Put it in. You're going to bite it off. You're going to bite your tongue off. You know, you're going to get injured. And I thought, well, okay. And then Michael Jordan started sticking his tongue out and sinking baskets, and I said, Dad, check it out. You know, just like Mike. And he's like, all right, fine. You can stick your tongue out. You're old enough now. If you want to bite your tongue off, go ahead. But I realized I still do it. My wife will look at me and go, look, your tongue's sticking out again. I'm like, all right, I'm focusing. Leave me alone, you know?
And yeah, that's when it happens.
Yeah, that's the only time I really do it. The only time anyone's ever pointed it out. I hope I'm not doing it all day long. I hope somebody would have told me that. But yeah, I think that's it is interesting, the facial expressions and the use of the tongue to complete circuitry. I've heard that pushing your tongue against the top of your mouth and against your teeth actually makes you stronger. So I've had athletes during powerlifting events make sure I have them make sure they're doing that. And the belief, potentially, maybe you can add to this, is that it completes sort of an electrical circuit in the body that you're, you know, to do that. Have you heard anything more about that?
I haven't heard a lot about that aspect of it, but I do know that, like, they teach a specific breathing protocol called Mewing. Mewing. And it's basically your tongue is to the roof of your mouth, pressed against like the back of your teeth, and you're just doing nasal breathing only, but you're thinking of like lifting through your, like, you know, the bottom side of your chin. So you're thinking of using that tongue as a muscle and bracing it almost against like your, basically the top of your mouth, and then just being able to do nasal breathing only, because what it does, it helps with the pitch of the mouth. Like the, you know, like some people have very narrow pitch. It can help with that because it starts to push out on the jaw there. So it's interesting, but like for me, I was working out the other day with the trainer that also works at my gym, and he's like, and I'm lifting, you know, 245-pound like deadlift, haven't been lifting any sort of weight like that in years. And I'm just sitting there doing nasal breathing only, tongue to the roof of my mouth, and it's just natural. So I'm just like moving it, and he goes, "You just made that look so easy." And I go, and it's not because I've moved weight that heavy, it's because I've adapted through breathing and actually have higher stamina and strength just through breathing. So
yeah, that's just it's such an amazing thing to think that breath, something we take so for granted, can be such a powerful tool, right? One of the questions I want to close with is, you know, 3 things that everyone should do to get in shape. I mean, I hate to oversimplify things because you've given us some great information today, and some of it's really deep and interesting, obviously. But I want to know, is there, for people that just want to run home with something simple, I always try to ask my guests, you know, to summarize by giving us a couple of take-home little tidbits. So what are 3 things that people should do? Like I asked you earlier about the strongest, the muscle that needs to be the strongest. What are some things that you think people can do to get in shape? You give us like 3 basic things.
as in like the sense of like exercises, or like just overall?
Yeah. Let's do exercises. Keep it simple. What are some, like, sometimes everyone says the number one thing, if you had one exercise, I asked one of my friends, a power lifter, Dr. Fred Cleary, who I think you'd enjoy. Watch that podcast. I think you'd enjoy it because he's right up your alley, and he's outrageous and a lot of fun. I asked him, you know, if he could do one thing, what would it be? So give us 3 things that you think the average person walking around needs to do and probably would do.
I mean, squats, I believe, are important just because you're going through that range. You got to sit on the toilet every day. So you might as well squat and do it well. So probably squatting, and then being able to hinge. So a deadlift, just being able to hinge properly without rounding through your spine the best that you can. And then any rotational stuff, because we lack so much of it. Like we don't move very well in that transverse plane. So even if you were to squat, stand up and do a rotation at the top, or even just literally standing there and just rotating through your trunk, something simple like that. So a lot of things that are basically the whole chain. So it's the whole kinetic chain from the feet all the way up. So learning to move through the ankle, the hip, the spine, and even the neck and the jaw. Like it's so important to go through everything.
I agree with you. I've read a lot by Mark Sesson, and one of the things he talks about is primal movements. And you think about it, you know, I like people to lunge a lot, because I think I've seen videos of older people tripping and falling down, and it's sad. And one of the things that they do is they might be walkers. Okay, so they have some strength at the very top of their leg movements, but that once you get them past, you know, 20 degrees of knee flexion, all of a sudden they don't have the glutes and the hamstrings and the quads to recover. So they trip, they step forward, they dive into about 20 degrees, and then all of a sudden they just collapse and they end up, you know, face planting, and it's horrible. So I would try to get my patients that are just walkers, and then that's their main thing, to also do some lunges. And I have them lunge up against a wall and then push off the wall and then lunge and then push off the wall to sort of get, just so they're not falling while they're doing my exercises, and to build up that lower body. So, well, like you're saying, a squat is very similar, the deadlift you're referring to, and of course, you know, rotation. The yoga spinal twist is my favorite stretch for people. And obviously that's extreme rotation, you know, it's for the whole spine. So
right.
Yeah, I think those are great tips.
Yeah, another tip for the lunge too is you can always do it with someone standing like, you know, parallel to the wall, and say like, so say you're standing, the wall is on your left hand side, your left foot is forward, and you're going to lunge back with your right. So you could stand a few inches off the wall, because what that'll do is that'll tell them and give them feedback that that hip has to sway out and back and touch that wall, come up, and then they can get support from that, so they're not going to fall over onto that joint on that side, and it'll keep their spinal position better as well. because the leaning forward is really good too, because it mimics like falling and being able to push off and go back. But that lateral motion is going to get them more stable in that range as well.
Fantastic. All right, this has been great. I appreciate you coming on. I really want to know, so if somebody wants to get a hold of you, they watch this podcast and they think, hey, she seems like the right person for me, how would they do that?
My website is Move Wisely, so www.movewisely, WYSELY.com. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and then, but all my contact information is right through that website. And I believe it's also on social media.
Fantastic. Thanks again for coming on. And for everybody watching, if you like these podcasts, give them a thumbs up, subscribe to the station, and give us some feedback, because we want to make these things, really custom made to make everybody really healthy and happy. So once again, Emily Wyse, thank you, personal trainer extraordinaire with multiple disciplines and experiences, for coming on today. I think everybody's learned a lot from you, and I've learned that you and I think a lot alike. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you have a great day. Okay.
You too. Thank you again for having me.
My pleasure. We'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds
good. Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.